How do you choose the best newsletter format for your audience? How visible should the founder of a media brand actually be? And what are the best ways to monetize your brand with merchandise? Well, you're about to find out. Welcome to the Clients from Content podcast. My guest today is Rob Roseman, who also happens to be a client of mine. Rob is the founder of WTF Divorce, a media company that helps people who are struggling to decide if they should get divorced, are stuck in the middle of expensive divorces, or are figuring their lives out after a divorce. You can find him every day on the WTF Divorce podcast and on his Instagram channel at WTF Divorce, where he shares tips from divorce lawyers and hilarious memes to 153,000 followers. In a former life, Rob was a trader on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and a Las Vegas poker pro. Hey, Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well. You've been in my group coaching program for a long time, so we've been working. And then a few weeks ago, you came on as an individual client. And now I feel like we've really hit the gas, which has been awesome. And as we were doing that, was like, you know what? You should come on the podcast and we should dive deeper into some of the stuff that we've been talking about, because not only do I think it will help you, but I think there's a lot of people in my audience that will help as well. So I'm excited to chat here and record it. So let's jump right into it. What is the first thing you want to know?
Yes. So I have built this big social media. I've got 153,000 people on Instagram, which is very exciting, gives you a lot of dopamine, and you quickly learn that there's a little inflation with it. Not all of these followers are buyers. And as you've always pushed me, and I learn every month in the group coaching, email is where you're going to do most of your business. So I've done some email. I've got a list about 1,600 people. I want to get into more consistent kind of modeling off the micro newsletter where I can promote some of our work on sponsorships, really just systematize what we're doing. I want to know what's a good format for that fits our brand.
So the first thing I want to say here, because I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but you are in a situation that a lot of people are in, although you substantially, because you have over 100,000 followers, is that the first thing you need to do is you need to get more of those followers onto your email list. So I've talked about that in a previous episode I did with comedian Zarna Garg and ways to do that. We'll link to it in the show notes. I'm not going to go into a lot of that now because we've talked about it before. But obviously, in order to do that, those tactics only work if you're creating a newsletter that people want and that fits what they want. So we're gonna talk about that and what the newsletter should be. So I think I'm going to start with a few different questions for us to talk about and pull out some ideas. There is no one right way to format a newsletter or anything like that. Obviously, it all depends on what you want to do and what your audience wants and all that kind of stuff. So just real quick to recap, because I know we've talked about this a bit. The goal of your newsletter, obviously, is to get those email addresses, to get a strong connection to them, to create another sort of sponsorable, monetizable asset at a sort of baseline. With that in mind, talk to me a little bit about you as a sort of consumer and reader, right? Because your audience, like a lot of people, you started a thing that you are sort of part of the audience, right? You went through divorce and it inspired you to start this thing. I'm curious, and this could be divorce related or not, setting aside my own, what are your favorite newsletters and why do you like them? Why do you read them regularly?
Well, I cannot put aside your own. It's one of the things that inspires me. And it's one of my favorite things about it is it's short. It's so simple to consume. I come to expect that. I know I'll finish it. So I like things that are not boring. They give me like a quick win, usually a laugh, something like that, but that I don't have to scroll down. So I think a lot of our content that really resonates on Instagram are the memes and the quick tips and the actionable things. So a big priority is to make our content very consumable. And it stands out in the divorce world because it's a lot of like boring legal jargon. So we differentiate ourselves by this is a serious subject, but let's give you just some quick hits and let you leave with a smile on your face instead of what's generally out there.
Yeah, I love a couple things. And this is a good exercise for anyone listening to do, right? When you're trying to figure out like what your newsletter should be, like think about your own actions, right? What do you like to consume? What do you like to read? And more importantly, like, why do you like that? And you touched on a bunch of those things, right? It's quick, it's actionable, it makes me feel good, it puts a smile on my face. And I think within there is an interesting thing for your brand in general that you compared it to in the divorce niche, not a fun topic. There's a lot of hard stuff and it can be depressing and scary and all of those things. And there's also, I would imagine, a lot of people playing into those fears to benefit from them. Lawyers that are telling you like, you're going to lose everything if you don't hire me and all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that you're doing that you've hit on that's interesting, that's probably, and this goes beyond newsletter, but part of your messaging is that whenever people interact with your content, whether that's Instagram, whether that's newsletter or whatever, they are going to come out of it feeling better than they did before. And they're living in a world, you're in a niche where most things that they're dealing with related to divorce are making them feel worse, not better. That's really powerful. And I think should probably be, and I'm just thinking about this after hearing you talk about it. We haven't actually talked about this yet, but I think that should probably be incorporated into your messaging. Something about the idea that like, this is a brand that's going to make you feel better. It might make you laugh. It might make you feel like you have more control, or you know what to do, or you're not drowning, but whatever it is, there's a transformation there, right? You're going through a really hard time, and this is going to make you feel better in a lot of ways. That's really important. And so I think the newsletter at its core, that should also be part of the messaging. That opening this up and reading it once a day, once a week, whatever frequency we wind up with, that's what you might be getting a laugh, and you might be getting a tip, and you might be getting whatever, but you're going to feel better than you did 2 minutes ago before you open the email. That's really powerful. And it's really valuable.
I agree. And I will say the overwhelm of divorce is really the feeling. There's just so much coming in. So you can differentiate ourselves just by being short and to be able to complete it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Talk to me about what your audience loves about, and you touched on it a little bit, but what do they love about what you currently do? And I think a good sort of way to think about this is when people consume your content in any form, podcast, Instagram, whatever, what would you say are the 3 most common emotions that people feel?
I would say relatable is very important. They get a smile on their face. I think that's important. They feel seen. I think divorce is very isolating and overwhelming. And when you see other people dealing with the same things and writing it instead of a lawyer talking to you, you feel a lot more connected to the content that you're consuming.
Okay. So one of the things, and we're just doing this on the fly, but when you have some time, take some time and write down all the emotions that they potentially feel. I'm glad you went to they feel seen, because relatable is not really emotion, but feeling seen is, right? That's the sort of result of that, or feeling like they're not alone. The reason why I like thinking about it in terms of emotions is because when you write a list of them and you go, okay, these are the 3 biggest ones. These are the 3 ones that they most often feel or that are the most powerful. You can then go look at your newsletter and go, I'm going to create a newsletter that makes them feel these 3 things. And that can help as you start to think about format and content, whatever. It gives you a sort of goal, right? You're no longer just about the topic. You're about, okay, I want them to feel seen. Well, what kind of content, what kind of thing would make them feel seen? I want them to get a smile on their face. What kind of thing? And you're already doing this sort of naturally through your other content channels. But I think as we start to spec out a newsletter, it's really helpful to have that as like, here's where we're going. And as you come up with content ideas, it also gives you a filter to check it against. Well, does this piece of content make them feel one of these 3 things? If it doesn't, we probably shouldn't be sharing it. So I think that can be helpful to have that filter as well. A couple other things that you want to think about in terms of a newsletter is you want to think about what is the reason for them to follow you in addition to following you on social. And so as we get into sort of more of what the newsletter is, we can get more clear on this in the messaging. It's fine to repurpose social content. I'm not one of those people that's whatever's in your newsletter can't be on social and vice versa. That's not the point. The truth is most people who love your social stuff don't see a lot of it because of the algorithms and whatever. So one simple reason for them to get your newsletter is to make sure they see stuff. And so if they like there will be people that are really good fans of your stuff that are going to be kind of annoyed that they want to see everything. And you can almost position Instagram as an enemy in this, right? Don't let Instagram prevent you from seeing what you want to see and you can do it in a fun way. Would you rather see our post about X, Y, and Z than some political rant that Instagram has decided to feed you because a bunch of bots commented on it? Then get our newsletter. You can play into people's frustrations with the way these platforms work. And if they're fans of yours, like that's a decent reason, right? Like I do want to see their stuff. And I'm going to get into some more ways that you can play these together. But just generally speaking, know that when you figure out the newsletter, you're going to want to come up with some messaging that's explaining to them why. A lot of times I see people on social accounts promote their newsletter, but they don't really explain why someone should subscribe. Oh, get our newsletter. But the person on the other end, I already follow you. Like, why do I need your newsletter? So you want to actively give people reasons to do that. Another thing to think about when it comes to newsletter sort of topic and format is to think about frequency and time investment. And you've already touched on this and you said you like my newsletter because it's quick and actionable and whatever. I'm a big believer, whether it's short or long, right? You want to optimize for the most possible value per minute for the audience and for yourself. So thinking through, okay, does it make sense to send this once a week? If I send it 3 times a week instead of once a week, is that actually going to give people more value? Is it going to create more value for me? Enough more value to warrant having to do it 3 times a week? Where do I want to start? In most cases, I would say it makes sense to start weekly, and then you can potentially scale up. Not necessarily, it depends on a variety of factors. Obviously, when you start getting into sponsorships, more issues can mean more inventory, can mean more money, but also a daily newsletter can scare some people away. And so in general, I would probably start weekly, but I could be talked out of it for a different scenario. But I think for you, it's understanding like, okay, and this is true of anything, right? Starting a podcast, whatever. I always look at it and go, in terms of frequency, if I put X amount of time into it, I can expect to get X amount of value. If I double the time in it, am I going to get double the value? Am I going to get triple the value? Am I going to get the same value? And sort of assessing that way, how much is it worth doing? In most cases, and in yours as well, like the reason I say it should probably be at least weekly, because I think you will get, if you were to do once every 2 weeks, that's okay. But I think the value you'll get out of doing weekly versus once every 2 weeks will be more than the amount of extra time it will take you to do it. I'm not sure if going daily, for example, would be the same calculation. It probably will at some point. I don't know that it would initially. Another thing to think about as you're thinking through what the newsletter is going to be is consider when and how people will consume it. So it may not matter, but it may, and there may be ways to frame it. So thinking about, is the idea that this is going to be something that people consume on weekends because weekends are tough, they don't have their kids, or what? You're going to know your audience, right? So thinking through, is there a time that it makes sense to do this, right? Is this this isn't your audience, but let's say you had an audience that had super stressful job. I don't know, some like high stress, high pressure, stock market, whatever it is, right? That's the audience. And you're like, we're going to send them the stupidest, silliest videos that we can find. And we're going to send it at lunchtime. So it's the whole purpose of this is an escape. And we're going to frame it as lunch break idiocy or whatever it is, right? Like your silly animals for stockbrokers or whatever it is. So again, I don't know that that there's going to be something like that for you, but thinking about, is there a time that would make sense, right? How's your audience likely to consume this, right? Are they going to consume it when they're at work? Are they going to consume it at night? Are they going to consume it on the weekends? Maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't, but that's something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like all that. And I did a daily newsletter following your lead for a week, and it was a lot of work, but it was pretty rewarding. I think the key though is systematizing it, because every day if you're thinking of what to write, that got overwhelming.
So that's a great lead into the next thing that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to share 2 potential newsletter formats to consider that could work in any niche. So one's dailies, one's weekly. Neither is better or worse than the other, but these are just examples of things that you or anyone else could consider to get you going. So the first one is you could have a daily newsletter that is essentially one daily thing with a brought to you by line, which is a sort of sponsor line. So similar to what I do. But what I think could be interesting is if you go the one daily thing approach, you don't have to do this, but you could brand it as one specific thing, right? So it could be, and I'm not just talking about your niche, this is any niche, right? The funniest fill in the blank of the day. You could go, you know what? My newsletter is the funniest divorce meme of the day. That's it. What's interesting is, let's say you did that. People will be tempted to just go, oh, it's the divorce meme of the day newsletter, but labeling it as the funniest divorce meme of the day newsletter. It's the exact same thing, but suddenly it suggests that you have scoured you're not just randomly sending a thing. It's almost like you're crowning and winning an award, right? The branding of this one daily thing can make it seem bigger. So years and years ago, I think this was like on Blogger. That's how long ago this was. Very early days of YouTube, whatever. I had started a blog, didn't last that long, even though I still think it was a good concept. But this was around the time that like stupid videos were all over the place, right? Like it was like early YouTube, early virality, early whatever. And I created a blog that was just going to basically share one of those every day. and I named it The Biggest Idiot on the Internet. The idea was that every day I'm going to literally name this is the biggest idiot on the internet. But all of it was a funny fail video of the day. Million sites like that. But that branding suddenly makes it interesting. So can you, if you're just going to share one thing a day, can you wrap it in branding that makes it interesting, right? So funniest is one of those ways to go. Another could be the one thing you need to know of the day. If it was like a lesson, it could be the divorce tip of the day. It could be the product of the day. Again, this can be in any niche. But if you, and this is not the only way to do a daily newsletter, but one format that can definitely work and be easy is to go, I'm going to pick one type of content, going to share that every day, and I'm going to brand it in a way that it's like, as this has been chosen, this is the award winner, this is the big thing that's going to make it feel even bigger than just, oh, he shares a funny video every day or funny. So that's the sort of daily format concept. A weekly concept that you could consider is basically you take, let's say, 3 of those different types of things. And so you have 3 of those things, and then you have a sponsored thing. Well, actually, I'm going to get to that in a second. So one way to do this, that this might actually be a fit for you in terms of a weekly, again, could also be daily. All this is flexible, but just general idea. You could say, I'm going to share a funny thing, a useful thing, and a surprising thing. And that's going to be my newsletter. And so you figure out what you call it and brand it, whatever, but you're basically going to have 3 sections. They're all going to be short. Here's a funny thing. Here's a useful thing. Here's a surprising thing. Now, what's interesting is going back to my question to you about the 3 emotions, you might pull those 3 emotions and be like, okay, whether you label them that or not, in your own mind, you're like, here's the thing that's going to put a smile on their face. Here's the thing that's going to make them not feel alone. Here's the thing that whatever. So you could match this up to the target emotion. And in this scenario, what I would probably do, depending on who your sponsors wind up being, is instead of having a sort of standalone sponsored section, I would insert the sponsor into one of those things in each issue. Let's say the sponsor was like a site that helps you find a lawyer, helps you find a divorce lawyer. That might be my useful thing. So I would label it sponsored, but it's integrated into the content as opposed to having a 4th item that is the sponsor. If the sponsor, the same sponsor, they could be the useful thing and go, hey, you need to find a lawyer. Here's a great resource to find a lawyer. You also, it could be the surprising thing. Maybe there's some stat about the average lawsuit takes blah, 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 blah. And so the sponsor becomes the surprising thing. The experts at such and such website have done research and found that the average person needs to meet with 6 different lawyers before they hire one or whatever. So you're creating branded sponsored content to plug into one of your 3 categories. Better for the sponsor, better for you, unique, interesting, feels like content, etc. Doesn't have to be either of those formats, but those are 2 formats to consider that you might find really helpful. And then the last thing I want to say here about newsletter stuff, jumping back to social, especially since you have a big account, whatever you're going to do, ultimately, you want to connect the newsletter to the social account so they play off each other. And so let me give you, here are 4 ways to use your newsletter and social media channels together. So the first is you can use social posts as a setup and the newsletter as a payoff, or vice versa. So for example, if you have a post featuring a crazy divorce story that performs well, you could tease that you just found an even crazier one that you're going to share in your newsletter next week. So you're leveraging, maybe you post it as a comment, maybe you post it from the beginning. By the way, at the end of your post, you go, if you love this crazy divorce story, wait till you see the one we're sharing in our newsletter. You could also reverse that. Your newsletter could share a crazy divorce story and go, hey, if you like this one, go here and see the one we shared on Instagram, connecting the content. The second way to use your newsletter and social channel together is to use the newsletter to highlight commenters. So you could have a caption contest, you could have people share stories, and then your newsletter highlights the best ones. Here's our Instagram comment of the week. This person shared this amazing thing. Want to go see the rest of the comments? Click here to go see them all in the Instagram feed. People like to be featured. They like to whatever. They also might subscribe just to see if they got picked. And if you want to give prizes, you can do that, but you certainly don't have to, whatever. But again, you're connecting these things. The content on both channels is playing off each other. The third one here is use a newsletter to drive to comments or questions on social. So this is a really easy one. Ask a question in your newsletter, just like you would a social post. But instead of asking them to reply with their answer, link to the post on social where you ask the same question. Go answer here. Really simple. It's going to help you on both fronts. And then the fourth way to leverage your newsletter and social channels together is send a newsletter issue minutes after posting something on social and drive people there to boost its reach or engagement. So for example, let's say you decide that your newsletter goes out on noon on Wednesdays. You might post something on Instagram at 11:55, link to it in the newsletter, and press publish. And what's going to happen is all those people that open it relatively quickly are going to click it. And now you're going to boost your reach in the Instagram, because Instagram going to go, what's going on with this post? Again, you're cheating the algorithm basically. So that won't always work. Like I would do that with mine, except for the fact that I schedule my newsletter to send at 6 a.m. and I'm not waking up to post a social post at 5:55 in the morning. But if you send at a time that makes sense, I think it's a really powerful strategy to boost your social reach. And so there you go. 4 ways to use your newsletter and social channels together. Any questions about any of that before we move on?
No, I like it a lot. I mean, I love the funniest of the day stuff because how can you not click on that? It's like what you always drive curiosity. I want to see what's in there. And the other thing with the commenters, like I think the most compelling part of our Instagram, besides the memes, is in our stories. We do a lot of when did you know it was time for a divorce? And I'll get hundreds of responses that I will share anonymously. And the people, sometimes you got to do a couple to get the wheels in motion, but they love, oh, me too. Oh my God, I went through that. So I feel like that is like the beating heart of our brand. And if we can find ways to tease that and say, oh, in the email, but that's the emotion that I want to leverage.
That totally makes sense. So before we get to our next question, just a quick side note. If you're listening to this podcast or watching, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I assume it's because you want to get more clients from your content, and I can help you do that. Since Rob is on and is a client of mine, and has been in my world for a while, and then just a few weeks ago became a one-on-one client, I thought it'd be interesting to give him a chance to tell you a bit about that. And in particular, I know, Rob, you and I had talked for a while. You were thinking about becoming a client and we went back and forth. So I'd be curious for anyone out there that is in the situation you were in a month ago. You're now on the other side. So any thoughts, and feel free to say whatever you want, any thoughts you have to that person about what you've learned? You're hopefully glad you've done it. If it's been helpful, anything you want to let them know.
Yeah. And that is the exact emotion I had. Oh, I want to do this, but can I afford the investment? And if I was making money, then it would be worth it. So I get that feeling of I'm going to do this when. For me, the jam sessions that you do once a month where we get to talk to you for even 5 minutes, you're just like, they're so helpful because there's another set of eyes on my stuff. And after doing those for a couple of years, I was just like, how can I get more of this, even if it's a few more a month, because that is so worthwhile. So for me, it's just having somebody that understands what you're trying to do and can see different ways to leverage what you're doing in your business and then make money. Because look, that's the main reason I wanted to invest money in, is I need to find ways to make more money with my business. And that's why I signed up. And for me, I always have buyer's remorse. I have buyer's anxiety. I never have buyer's remorse. So it took me a few months to pull the trigger on it. And right when I did it, while I was traveling on Thanksgiving at my family's, I've never been so happy to click buy on something. And afterwards, I felt great. So I think that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I can completely relate to the sort of buyer's anxiety, buyer's remorse. I'm the same way. Like I'll drag my heels and I never really regret it. One other quick question, just because I'm curious. Is there anything so far in our work together that has surprised you? I mean, obviously you knew me and you know where I come from, but you never know exactly what it's going to be till you start. Has anything surprised you in terms of how we've started working together?
Yeah, well, it was a lot of depth to it. So you send me a Google Doc that it's spew all my thoughts onto, and then you really take time to marinate on it. You're not just go do one thing. And now we're getting to the action plan part of it, which is really what I want. I've got a million great ideas, but how can I implement them? How can I systematize them? You even got me reading the Buy Back Your Time book, which I purchased. And I'm like, it just all comes together. And for me, just having somebody on your team, like giving you some direction as like a solopreneur, it's so overwhelming that I think everybody that's trying to create their own business find a lot of value in working with somebody like you.
Great. Thank you so much for that. For anyone that's listening or watching, if you're interested, just email me at joshspector.com. Tell me a little bit about your situation. I'll be happy to give you some suggestions and talk about I can help you. All right. So let's get back to giving you some more help, Rob. So what's the second question you want to ask?
Yeah. So I built this. I didn't really build a business. I figured let me build an audience first, and then I'll figure out a way to monetize it because I know how valuable distribution is. But then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, how am I going to monetize it? I'm doing a few different things. But what I really want to do is become more of a media company. I find like a Barstool Sports of divorce. You mentioned it. That's always been in my head.
Mhm.
I do have I'm a little conflicted though, because I don't like being 100% the brand. I don't like doing talking head videos all the time. I'm on there sometimes, but how big of a part of the brand do I have to be? How on camera do I have to be for this to be successful?
So this is a great question. I was excited to talk with you about it. So the first thing I'll say is there's no have to anywhere. So part of the simplest answer is just, well, what do you want to do? How big of the part of it do you want to be? I think it's really important with this and with a lot of things to understand that you could be invisible and build a massively successful media company. It could be the Rob Divorce Show, and you could build a massively successful company. So the idea, I think, a lot of times is people get paralyzed of, well, do I have to do this, but I don't really want to do this, but do I need to do that? No, you could be super visible and it could be all about you and you could succeed, or not at all and succeed. But the key is making a sort of deliberate choice. This is how involved I want to be. And then building a strategy and everything that aligns with that. Because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I'm doing this. I'm the face of this because I think I need to be the face of it, but I don't really want to be the face of it. So I'm not really going to do the things that I need to do to be the face of it. Or the opposite. I want to be the face, but I don't think I should be the face. So I'm not really going to do. So the key is just deciding, okay, this is the path I want to go. And let me build my strategy to align with that. Another thing I want to say up top here is that brand isn't what you say it is, it's what the audience says it is. So that's just a sort of general branding concept to understand, right? That whatever we do, whatever you do, we're going to have intentions about this is how I want to communicate what this brand is. But ultimately, it's what other people say about you, right? So the intentions are important because it can guide your actions and you hope that it resonates and that's what people are seeing. But you see all the time people that are like, our brand is high-end luxury brand. Well, it's not if high-end luxury buyers aren't buying you. I actually saw something the other day. I forget exactly which brands they were talking about, but they were talking about how there's a couple high-end luxury brands who have introduced some product lines that are lower tier to try to expand their market, and they're like ruining their brand in the process. So I guess my first question to you would be, how involved do you feel like you want to be? Not involved, but how much, of you personally do you feel like you want to or are comfortable being in there?
Less than half. I don't know what a number is. A lot of what we do is we share a lot of great content. There's a lot of
Mhm.
great contributors. And look, the other piece is like, while I started this to be help divorced dads, our audience is 80% divorced moms or women going
Mhm.
through divorce. So while it's, I think, refreshing to hear coming from a guy, I don't feel totally comfortable. I feel like a lot of our sponsors, potential sponsors, are women products. I do have
Mhm.
somebody on my team that's excellent, that can be more of the face. But yeah, I don't love being super vulnerable with my divorce.
Mhm.
I'll talk about it, but yeah, not non-existent, but a little bit more in the background and more of the director, producer than the
Mhm.
star of the show.
That totally makes sense to me and is in line with kind of what I figured you would say. And so I know we talked about this a little before as one of the notes that I had sent you. So, and again, everything evolves, right? It starts in one place and it evolves into another thing. But like with that in mind, it's like your personal photo shouldn't be the profile picture for the brand's Instagram. It's because it's not about you. That's what I mean about the alignment of decisions. If your involvement is less than 50% of the brand, the emails probably shouldn't come from Rob from WTF divorce, even though generally I'm a fan of sending from individuals and all of that. But the truth is, if you're building a different kind of brand and company and it's not the Rob show, doesn't mean you need to be invisible. There's a difference between sending an email and signing it from Rob and having the sender name be Rob. It's different. Again, I think figuring that out, and that's why we're talking about this. One other just side note here, and this is again for everybody, the more heavily the brand is around you, the harder it is to sell if that interests you down the road. So that's another risk of there are pros and cons to having your personal brand be very tied up in it. I'm not saying you should do it one way or the other, but I do think sometimes people do that and they don't realize. And by the way, I'm a victim of that. I'm building a successful business that no one could really buy. So at the end of the day, I'm creating value for myself in the moment and I have an audience and I have a whatever. But if I were tomorrow to be like, all right, I'm out, I'm done, I don't know who's going to buy my newsletter. And if they do, most people are probably going to be like, so I'm creating some value, but that is something, again, you're in a totally different space. But when it comes to building a media company, I do think it's something to think about, right? You don't want to build a media company that is dependent on you, and that if you step away, even if you don't sell it, even if you're just like, you know what, this thing's doing well, I'm going to hang out and be less involved. If you're very much front and center, it's much harder to do that. But so what I think for you, and I think for people that are in your space where it's, yeah, you want to be involved, you want people to know it's you, but you don't really want to be this, or it's not about you. The way I think of it is, I think of your role as being an evangelist. Obviously, you're the founder, but you're an evangelist for the brand. And I think importantly, you're not the only evangelist for the brand. So I think if you want to think about how, it's funny because this concept, suddenly you start to look everywhere and you see it everywhere, right? But think about how shows and networks and create multiple brand characters. So the Howard Stern show is very much Howard Stern, but everybody that works on the show is a character. It's not just Howard Stern. And that's with him front and center. But if you look at a different one, right, like ESPN, those announcers are characters. They're evangelists for whether it's Stephen A. Smith, whether it's Pat McAfee, whether it's whatever, right? There is no ESPN guy who's unlike a Howard Stern, but even with a Howard Stern where he's predominant, like it created these multiple things. Businesses, you'll see companies where smart companies want a lot of their executives and a lot of their employees building their own LinkedIn presences because they become evangelists for the work that the company is doing. Even late night talk show hosts. Why did Johnny Carson have a sidekick? Why does Jimmy Fallon have the Roots? Why does Conan have Masturbating Bear? Like these recurring characters, right? So I think as you build this sort of bigger media company, thinking about, okay, I'm going to be an evangelist for this brand. I'm the founder, I'm the owner, I'm the whatever. But how am I going to develop other quote unquote character? I say characters, but I mean real people, right? But other people who maybe they work for me, but maybe they're just people that we partnered with. Maybe they're influencers, maybe they're whatever. Who's going to be the sort of quote unquote face for women? If you look at it, it's interesting to think about a company like ESPN because you can go, Stephen A. Smith is the face for this particular part of the audience. Pat McAfee is the face for this particular part of the audience. Paul Feinbaum is the face for this particular. So looking at your audience and going, all right, who's going to be the sort of evangelist for these people? Like, how can I create some characters within my content, within my stuff that people within podcasts, within different things? Because if you can do that, imagine if you had 3 different people in addition to yourself that were kind of characters within the WTF universe, all building their own sort of niche followings, but as a part of this sort of umbrella thing. That's powerful. You can see how you start to build a sort of thing. So that's one thing I would think about. As far as you and your role, I think there's some specific things that make sense in terms of where you should be visible, where I think it makes sense for you to be most visible, right? I don't think it makes sense for you to be the profile picture. I don't think it makes sense for the emails necessarily coming from Rob, but I do think there's some places where it really does make sense for you to be visible. So, and this I think is universal. Here are 5 times a media company founder should be visible without being the day-to-day face of the brand. So the first is you should be visible to business partners, sponsors, and clients. They should know you. They should know Rob owns that thing. Even if you have a salesperson, especially in the beginning, you want to be visible to them, right? Hey, I'm the guy that owns this and this is my story and I care about it and I'm hands-on. And that sort of business networking, client sponsor thing makes sense. And that includes not just one-to-one, but that includes if you're posting on LinkedIn, right? Like that, what should your LinkedIn strategy be? It should be you as media company founder, that kind of thing, right? That visibility matters there way more than you being the one that's posting on Instagram, even if you are the one that's posting on Instagram. The second place is you should be visible to the industry. So getting on conferences, getting on panels, being interviewed on business or media company podcasts, doing PR, that visibility is really powerful and really helpful. So that's another place where you want to be seen. The third place is your origin story. The origin story as relates to the founder should be visible. You didn't just start this because you're like, oh, I want to make some money. Like your backstory and the origin of this gives it credibility, has a nice story for PR and all that kind of stuff. So that's another place where you want that story, right? Whether it's on the website, and I know you already have this, but here's how it came up. That's a place where it makes sense for you to be visible. The fourth place that media company founders should be visible is on personal social media accounts. Like I said, probably LinkedIn in your case, maybe Twitter, maybe Blue Sky, but most likely LinkedIn. You want to be posting there and not just sharing the divorce content, but talking about you want to be seen as a guy that's building a successful media company. If you want to build Barstool for divorce, you want to be seen as the guy building Barstool for divorce. And if you were to look at, for example, Morning Brew, even Dave Portnoy, which that's a whole other story, but even if you look at him in terms of like him on Barstool, he's talking about the business of it, right? The Morning Brew founders, like they have built a following talking about the business of being founders of Morning Brew. And that's, I think, the way you want to be seen, which will also help give credibility to what you're building. People don't know if you're not talking about it. And then the fifth time I think a media company founder should be visible is when there's an issue. You're lucky you don't have a lot of issues, I don't think, but stuff will come up. And I think then and it may not necessarily be public, it may not be social media, but something happens with a sponsor or what stuff happens, right? Not hiding from that. But I think in terms of like, where should you be seen? That's the fifth place you should be seen. So visible to business partners, visible to the industry. Your origin story should be visible on personal social media accounts as a successful media company founder, and then visible when there's an issue or problem. All that makes sense?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And actually, what you said, I started it with I was not the profile pic, it was WTF or something. And when you're starting, you almost do need to be the face of it. So I think when you got 500 followers, nobody cares what WTF is. They want to know the person. But then, like you said, the business grows, it changes. And I'm sure it was a little bit of rationalization, but I think a lot about the key man risk of I do not want to be the brand. I want the brand to be bigger. So yes, thank you.
Well, and it's the classic, what got you here won't get you there. It all made everything you did, I think, make sense and probably helped you. But I think now you're at a point where it's okay. This is not that it's not already a media company, but we're going this way. And the founder of this would not be. So that's the right direction. So let's get to your third question. What is the last thing you want to know?
Yeah, so I'm exploring all different ways to monetize. I've got some sponsorships, I've got some clients. Merch is something I've always wanted to get into, and I've tried somewhat unsuccessfully with kitschy coffee cups and things. But what we did create a journal, a book, and a couple of them that have done pretty well. And the content is almost the Instagram transposed into a easy to buy book on Amazon. And I'm actually in the process. We just hit publish on a new couple journals, but just really easy to digest content. So trying to think of like ways to monetize the brand with, I'd say merch, but these publishing angles. What are your thoughts on how to go about that?
Yeah, so a few thoughts. So the first thing I would say that you just mentioned in your description of that is you have this massive advantage in that you have this big audience. And so, like you said, the journals are basically taking stuff that worked on Instagram. So you have the ability to test anything. Like you should not be making any merchandise on a sort of guess. It's always a guess to some degree because you don't know if people are going to buy or whatever. But we really should be looking for these are things that proven to resonate with my audience on Instagram. How can I turn it into a journal, a t-shirt, whatever? That's market research. So I think that's the first thing that I would say. Also, I'm going to mention this. I know I sent it to you previously, but for people that are listening to this, there's a book by a guy named Bobby Hundreds called This Is Not a T-Shirt that I recommend to anyone that wants to do anything with merchandise. He's a guy that built like one of the big sort of streetwear brands and all that kind of stuff. And it's just really smart, not only about his business, but also the underlying understanding of like why people buy merchandise and branded merchandise and like, why are people paying $100 for a t-shirt and all that kind of stuff? Very smart, good stuff. So I recommend reading that. The other thing I would say is for the most part these days with most of what you're going to be selling, especially at first, you can sell so much on demand and I know like you're doing this. I don't think you're spending but I'm sure there are people out there that are like going and printing up 1,000 shirts. I have no idea why you would do that. So definitely sell on demand and you don't have to risk a lot of money to test if some things are going to work, which I think is another lesson too, right? You can run some tests, especially as you grow your email list. Maybe you don't even test it on the full Instagram audience. Maybe you go, all right, we're just going to put this in the email and see if people are interested. And if they are, then maybe we'll expand into bigger promotion, whatever. In general, and this applies to the journal a little bit, but it applies more to traditional merchandise. People buy things to express something, especially clothes, coffee mug, but even the journal in some ways, they're buying it to express something. So thinking about what does your audience want to express and how can you create products that allow them to express it. And that also includes gifts, right? When someone buys someone a gift, yeah, they're giving it for the other person, but they're trying to say something about themselves. It's funny. This is a sort of side note and not necessarily a paid thing, but yesterday I got the mail and there were a bunch of holiday cards from friends and family and whatever. And we had just made ours and just sent it out. And I was looking at them and they're all nice. And all of them are pretty much some version of happy holidays. And here's our family. And right. Our card is that, but with a silly photo of my daughter, a funny message. And it struck me that I was like, I'm not knocking it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, all these people, like no one wanted to do anything different. And it was so weird to me because I was like, wait, I'm the only, and I know I'm not the only one, but just looking through the like cards that I got, it was like, I was thinking about myself, and some of this may be about me, but it was like, I have no interest in sending a sort of generic. There's some part of me that wants to express that I'm not like all the other generic holiday cards, for better or worse. I'm not saying that people should be like that. I'm just saying, I think when people buy and when people are doing things, they want to express. It's the same thing with greeting cards, right? Or like birthday cards or whatever. Like I've never bought a birthday card at the store that was not at least an attempt at a funny card, but lots of people do. Clearly, there's nothing wrong with it. But I'm a buyer who wants to express some other thing. So thinking about in your products, right? What do they want to express? If they're wearing a t-shirt that says something, what is it that like they've chosen? Like, I want to put this on a billboard, and you can see it in funny t-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And you can also see it in brands, right? The choice to wear a t-shirt that has a Nike logo versus a t-shirt that has an Apple logo versus a t-shirt that has a Ramones logo. Those are conscious, deliberate choices because that person wants to express something versus a t-shirt with no logo. So understanding that and understanding your audience and thinking about what might they want to express and how can I create merchandise that helps them express that? It can be really powerful. Another thing about merchandise, and this definitely ties into the sort of journals and publishing stuff, thinking about creating merchandise that taps into specific buying moments and then potentially partnering with people's in those spaces. So for example, divorce parties are a thing. In theory, I assume you would know better than me. So what merchandise do you have that could be a great divorce party gift?
Yeah.
Taking a step further, I was thinking about your journal. And this is another thing. You start to think about, like when I say buying moments, so it could be like a divorce party. It also could be who are the people that are on the front lines of dealing with your niche? So a lot of lawyers, for example, right? So could lawyers buy your journals in bulk to give to clients? Could you package together journals and a bunch of stuff that you could then reach out to lawyers and you could call it whatever you want to call it, right? Either the like, congratulations, you made it to the other side. Within that, there's a bunch of moments, right? There's the, oh, you just hired me as a lawyer and here's your survival guide. It could be, we just finished your divorce. Good luck in the next chapter. But if you could create some themed packages like that, reach out to lawyers who have money. For them, it's nothing. And they get to create these little, I was thinking about, this is a different thing, but like when we bought our house, after we closed on the house, the real estate agent gave us some gifts, like congratulations, like housewarming gift, whatever. Well, for lawyers who are looking to differentiate themselves, who are looking to whatever, it doesn't cost them anything. It comes out of probably 3 minutes of what they've billed their clients for. But for you, you get a couple law firms to give it to all their clients. You got bulk money coming in all the time. And who else is doing that? Nobody. So I think thinking about those kind of opportunities, but again, it's the packaging. So going to them and saying, hey, we've got this thing, maybe includes a t-shirt and includes the journals and includes what you figure out what it is. And we've got a divorce survival kit and we've got a congratulations, you're free kit. It's all over. You did it, whatever. Somebody might buy it. And by the way, you could then also sell those. You can sell them to lawyers, but you could also sell them to the public, right? Your friend's getting a divorce, your whatever it is. And I don't know, maybe even real estate agents who are dealing with house sales and that kind of stuff. So again, thinking about buying moments. The other thing along those lines is getting other people to sell your merchandise to their audience. So affiliate deals, influencer deals, find other people who are reaching these audiences and cut them in on the action, right? It's worth 50% of the profit if they can whatever. The other thing that you could do is, again, another thing to experiment with, is besides using merchandise to generate revenue, you can use merchandise to fund growth. So you could go to an influencer that you think has a lot of divorced moms or whatever in their audience and say, look, we've got these journals. You can sell them to your audience and I'll give you all the profit for what you sell. But what I want in exchange is I want promotion, which you're going to get because they're going to be promoting the journal. So it doesn't cost you anything, but it's growing the brand and if it's a partner that has a lot of people, that might be worth it. And for that partner who's probably out there going, how do I monetize these 20,000 divorced moms that I have? And you just served up, hey, I got a product, take the profit. I don't care. Because the other thing is for you, it's like an advertising cost, but it doesn't cost you anything because you're just giving them the profit and you're acquiring them and you can go sell them other stuff. They can buy your other journals, you can whatever. So merchandise as a funding mechanism for growth is also worth experimenting with. Another thing in terms of merchandise, scarcity obviously works. So limited edition stuff. If you're going to experiment with t-shirts, with clothes, with hats, whatever, see what happens if you limit it. See what happens if you go, you know what? We got 50 of these t-shirts and we're charging a higher price and that's it. Some audiences that will work really well. Other audiences it won't, but you can see. But that's something to keep in mind. Collaborations, another one. Can you find a woman who's a really cool divorced artist and say, hey, let's partner on something. Let's do limited edition prints. Let's do a journal with that's another interesting thing, right? Could you go find divorced creators and do collaborative journals? A lot of these creator artist types, they need stuff to sell. So you would be able to go, let's say it was even a writer, right? Let's say you went to some writer and said, hey, would you like to collaborate on a divorce journal? You write the prompts. We got a big audience. We'll publish the journal. We'll split the money that comes from it. We both promote it to our audience. That could be really, again, if you can make it work, that could be really interesting to do these sort of collaborative journals with people that have audiences. Another thing is, and this goes back to testing stuff, can you create a phrase that people want to wear? Can you create something that people want to be a part of? That's going to come from testing. That's going to come from a lot of sort of testing stuff on Instagram. And is there a slang? What's your equivalent of Baba Booey for Howard Stern, right? An inside language that you can then build on. Another thing, and this is just a reference. Have you ever heard of Dad Gang?
No.
Okay. So Dad Gang, you can Google it and you'll find a bunch of like stories about them. So I don't know when it started, a couple years ago, maybe during the pandemic. Anyway, a few dads are on like a group text chain and they're just they're friends. They're talking about whatever. And then whenever they were talking about like stuff that they had to do with their kids or stuff that related, they would just go, I don't know if they use hashtag or not, but they would just be like, Dad Gang. Like it was their sort of inside way of going, this is what dad life is, right? My kid was up on that Dad Gang. And then they decided to produce some hats. And their observation, their take was that all the sort of dad clothes and merchandise, none of it was cool, right? It was all cheesy, lame, whatever. And that's not how they felt. And they were part of this community and they related to each other. And so they literally, I think, took like $700 and made some hats with a cool logo that says Dad Gang, whatever, sold out instantly. And it's now become this massive, like direct to consumer business. All they sell is hats, I think. But people buy them because they've found a space where it's cool. And again, this is what I mean about a word or a phrase that they want to be associated with. They're nice hats. And I think on the side, they have the abbreviation. So there's a community around it, but it's not really a community play, but it's people that want to, why does someone buy the Dad Gang hat? Because they want to identify as I'm a certain type of dad, I'm a certain type of whatever. But you should Google them and read up about it because it's really interesting. And I think obviously being a dad, there's similarities, but it's different. But I think trying to can you find a thing that people are like, I want to wear that. I want to represent that. That phrase, that's something. And then the last thing I want to give you here is, I think if you're going to do merchandise, here are 4 questions to ask yourself about any merchandise that you plan to sell. So the first one is, what does buying this help someone say that they want to say? The second one is, would you yourself buy, wear, or use this thing? If you're remotely like your audience, and in most cases people are, you certainly are, if you wouldn't genuinely buy, wear, or use it, it's probably not a good idea to sell it. Doesn't mean there won't be other people who will, but you're probably better off with stuff that you would want to wear or buy or use. The third question to ask yourself about merchandise is, has anyone in your audience asked for it? Even if they didn't ask directly for it, have they told you, I can't figure out this, or I wish this, or I hate that just like the dad gang example, right? I hate that all the dad clothes are so like lame and cheesy and whatever. Or have they already purchased it when given a chance? Did you create a small offer and send it to 100 people in your audience and some of them bought? Do you have any signs that people actually want this thing, or are you just taking a flyer? And then the fourth question to ask yourself about any merchandise you plan to sell, what's the problem this solves for buyers? And that's obvious if it's a sort of use case, but even a t-shirt, even in a hat, solves a problem. Even if it's not a quote unquote problem, it's solving that they want to express this. There's something that it's helping them do. If it's a high-end brand, they want to say something about it. If they're giving it as a gift to someone, they want people to think, oh, wow, he bought me this really expensive, whatever. So there is a problem that it's solving for them. And if you can't figure out what problem the thing is that you're selling solves, then it probably doesn't solve a problem and they're probably not going to buy it. So those 4 questions, ask yourself before selling any merchandise. Questions about any of that?
No, it's fantastic. And I struggled a bit. Are people going to wear divorce shirts? And I don't think they are. Like you said, I'm not going to. So why would I sell it?
Yeah.
But I think the gift giving, that's a problem.
Mhm.
What the hell do you gift for somebody? And how does it make me feel when I send Josh this book that's like, the cover says, here's 28 reasons I can't stand my ex. You feel cool for sending it. So you almost want to capture that moment of the buying it and the receiving it. And that's half the battle.
Yeah. And you know what? The other thing you can do from a research perspective is, because it's such an advantage to have this big audience, talk to them. Ask, what's the best divorce gift you ever got? What's the worst divorce gift you ever got? Have you ever bought someone a divorce gift? Did your lawyer ever give you asking people what happened what did your lawyer say, or what was the last day of your divorce when you said goodbye to the lawyer? They give you a bottle of champagne. Finding out from your audience, like, what are they buying for other people? What do people get for them? What do they think is cool? What do they think is horrible? Really powerful, because there's probably some ideas in there and some trends that you would not otherwise know or see. Even if you asked, did your lawyer give you any kind of good luck gift when the divorce was done? I mean, I don't know, 10%, like if 10% say, yeah, they did, that tells you something. If 70% tell you, I don't know. Do you know? I would have no idea.
Or it could be, would you want to? And then we can show lawyers that like people want this. Here's a good, interesting, unique way to do it. So we can test a lot in the Instagram, and that's like what we need to be doing more of.
Yeah. And finding out, what are they buying? What are they wearing?
Yeah. Oh, it's super helpful.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And thank you for coming on, and thank you for the questions, and thank you for working with me. I'm super excited at the progress we're already making. Let people know, because fortunately or unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of my audience who is going through divorce or has been divorced or could use some of the putting a smile on their face that you give them. So tell them where they can find your stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, the stats say 50%. I'm sure that number is only going up. So I am at WTF Divorce on Instagram, WTFdivorce.com. Hard to forget the name. Yes, if you're feeling it and you just have nobody to talk to, family, friends, we got your back. So I appreciate the opportunity, Josh.
Yeah, of course. And my stuff, my newsletter, fortheinterested.com/subscribe. If you're interested in finding out how I can help you personally get more clients from your content, email me, Josh@joshspector.com. Thanks as always for listening and watching, and I will see you next time.